The vast emptiness of space had become my constant companion over the past few months. The hum of the spaceship's engines was the only sound that broke the silence, a soothing reminder that the ship was functioning as it should. I had grown accustomed to the solitude, the isolation, and the endless void stretching beyond the windows. But that night, as I sat in my small quarters, cleaning and organizing my gear, I felt a strange unease prickling at the back of my mind. My room was modest, a single bed tucked into the corner, a narrow desk cluttered with tools and weapons, and a viewport offering a glimpse of the infinite cosmos outside. It wasn't much, but it was enough for one person. I had spent countless nights in that room, poring over schematics, calibrating my plasma blade, or simply staring out into the stars, wondering what the future held. That night, I was preparing my equipment, a necessary routine in case of unforeseen dangers. My plasma blade gleamed under the dim overhead light as I inspected its edge for imperfections. Beside it lay my ion blaster, a compact but deadly weapon, along with a handful of pulse grenades. These tools were my lifeline in this unpredictable universe, and I treated them with the respect they deserved. As I worked, a faint vibration in the air caught my attention. It wasn't the steady thrum of the engines or the usual creak of the ship settling into its trajectory. This was different, subtle but distinct, like the faint hum of energy gathering in one spot. I straightened, my hand instinctively reaching for the ion blaster. Before I could fully process what was happening, a shimmering blue light appeared near the door. It was faint at first, like a ghostly wisp, but it quickly grew brighter and more defined. My pulse quickened as the light coalesced into a humanoid form. When the figure fully materialized, I found myself staring at a being of unparalleled beauty. Her presence was otherworldly, her very existence radiating a sense of grace and power. She was tall and slender, her figure wrapped in an iridescent fabric that shimmered with every movement. Her skin glowed faintly, a soft silver hue that seemed to catch the light in ways I couldn't understand. Her hair, long and flowing, cascaded down her back like a waterfall of liquid starlight. But it was her eyes that captivated me the most, large and luminous, a deep amethyst that seemed to hold the secrets of the universe. She looked at me, her gaze curious yet commanding, and spoke in a voice that was both melodic and firm. "You are a human called Torin, are you not?" Her words startled me. How did she know my name? My grip tightened on the ion blaster, though I didn't raise it. "Who are you, and what are you doing in my quarters?" I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt. She tilted her head, studying me as if I were some peculiar specimen she'd just discovered. "I am Rihanna, Princess of the Valoran," she said, her tone regal yet calm. "I came because I sensed something unusual." Her words did little to ease my tension. "Unusual? What are you talking about, and how did you get on my ship?" Rihanna ignored my questions, her gaze shifting past me to the desk where my weapons were laid out. She stepped closer, her movements graceful and deliberate, and pointed to the plasma blade. "These are tools of war, are they not?" I hesitated before answering. "They're tools for survival," I said cautiously. "Out here, you can't afford to be unprepared." She picked up the blade, her fingers tracing its sleek design with a mix of fascination and disapproval. "Humans and their weapons," she murmured, "always ready to fight, to destroy. Is that what defines your kind?" Her words stung, but I wasn't about to let her judgment go unchallenged. "We don't fight because we want to," I said firmly. "We fight because we have to. Space isn't kind, Princess. If you're not ready to defend yourself, you won't last long." She regarded me for a moment, her expression unreadable, before placing the blade back on the desk. "Perhaps," she said softly, "but there is more to survival than violence." Before I could respond, Her attention shifted again, this time to me. Her eyes roamed over my figure, lingering in a way that made me uncomfortable. Then her gaze dropped lower and her expression changed. Her amethyst eyes widened in what I could only describe as shock, and her cheeks flushed a faint lavender. "What is that?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. It took me a moment to realize what she was referring to. I followed her gaze and felt my stomach drop. She was staring directly at the lower half of my body, where the loose fabric of my sleep pants did little to obscure my anatomy. Heat rushed to my face, and I quickly grabbed the blanket from my bed, wrapping it around myself. It's part of my body," I stammered, feeling more embarrassed than I ever had in my life. Her eyes remained fixed on me, her expression a mixture of curiosity and confusion. "Is it a weapon?" she asked hesitantly. "A biological tool for combat?" I nearly choked on my own breath. "No, it's not a weapon. Look, it's part of human reproduction, okay? It's private." Rihanna's brow furrowed as she processed my words. "Reproduction?" she repeated slowly. "It creates life?" I nodded, unsure how much detail I should provide. "Yes, it's how humans reproduce. Surely your species has something similar." Her expression softened, and she stepped closer, her movements careful, as if she were approaching a wild animal. "Our reproduction is different," she admitted. "It is clinical, devoid of physical connection. We do not merge in the way you describe." Her words surprised me. "So, you've never experienced intimacy?" She shook her head, her silver hair catching the light. "Number, our bonds are formed through the mind, not the body. The concept of physical intimacy is foreign to us." There was a hint of sadness in her voice, and I found myself feeling a strange mix of empathy and curiosity. "It's not just about reproduction," I said softly. "It's about connection, trust, and love. It's something humans cherish deeply." Rihanna's gaze lingered on me, her eyes filled with a longing I couldn't quite understand. "Love," she whispered, as if tasting the word for the first time. "Such a concept is rare among my people. Perhaps that is why I was drawn here, to learn what it means." The room fell into a heavy silence, the weight of her words settling between us. For the first time, I saw her not as a regal alien princess, but as someone searching for something she had never known. As the moment stretched on, I realized that this encounter was more than a chance meeting. It was an opportunity, a chance for two beings from vastly different worlds to bridge the gap between them. And for the first time in my journey, I felt that I wasn't so alone after all. The silence between us lingered, heavy with the weight of unspoken questions. I found myself unable to look away from Rihanna's face. Her expression, though regal, bore an unmistakable vulnerability, a kind of quiet yearning that made my chest tighten. For someone who claimed her species did not experience physical intimacy or emotions like love, she seemed acutely affected by the conversation. I asked, finally breaking the silence, "What do you hope to learn?" My voice was softer now, more curious than cautious. Rihanna tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. "I am uncertain," she admitted. "I have studied humans from afar. Your species is unpredictable. You wage wars and destroy, yet you create beauty and show compassion. There is a duality to your nature that I do not understand." I couldn't help but smirk at her observation. "Yeah, we're complicated," I said, leaning back against the edge of my desk, "but that's what makes us human." She stepped closer, her movements so fluid they seemed more like gliding than walking. "And this complexity," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "it fascinates me, especially the concept of love. Among my people, connection is logical, pragmatic. It serves a purpose and nothing more. But humans," her gaze searched mine, "you risk everything for love. Why?" The question caught me off guard. How do you explain something as profound and ineffable as love to someone who has never felt it? I took a deep breath, searching for the right words. Because love is worth it, I said finally. It's messy and complicated, sure, but it gives life meaning. It's the one thing that makes all the chaos bearable. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, the regal air about her seemed to melt away, revealing someone who was just as lost as anyone else. Meaning, she repeated, almost to herself. Perhaps that is what we lack. The vulnerability in her voice stirred something in me, a protective instinct I hadn't felt in years. Before I could stop myself, I reached out and placed a hand gently on her arm. Her skin was cool to the touch, smooth and faintly luminous. The contact startled her. She flinched ever so slightly, her wide amethyst eyes darting to where our skin met. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, pulling my hand back. "I didn't mean to—" "No," she interrupted, her voice steady, but laced with curiosity. "Do it again." I hesitated, unsure of her intent, but the earnestness in her gaze was impossible to ignore. Slowly, I extended my hand again, resting it lightly on her forearm. This time, she didn't flinch. Instead, she studied the connection with a mixture of wonder and apprehension. "This is strange," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our kind does not touch like this. It is forbidden." I raised an eyebrow. "Forbidden? Why?" "Touching is seen as primitive," she explained. "An unnecessary distraction from higher pursuits. Physicality is undignified." I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. And yet here you are, holding a primitive human's arm. Her lips curved into a faint smile, the first I had seen from her. It was fleeting but genuine, and it lit up her entire face in a way that made my chest ache. "Perhaps I am undignified," she said softly, almost playfully. The moment was interrupted by a sudden sharp beep from the ship's console. I turned instinctively, my eyes narrowing as I moved toward the desk to check the alert. The screen displayed a proximity warning. A small, unidentified craft had entered the ship's radar range. "Are you expecting company?" I asked, glancing back at her. Rihanna's expression darkened, the warmth from moments ago replaced by a cold determination. "No," she said firmly, "but it may be someone searching for me." "Searching for you?" I echoed, my grip tightening on the edge of the desk. "Why would someone be looking for you?" She hesitated, her gaze flickering with something I couldn't quite place. Fear, perhaps, or guilt. "Because I left without permission," she admitted. "My mother, the Queen, does not approve of my curiosity." The weight of her words settled over me like a storm cloud. "So you're telling me there's a royal search party out there, and they might be hostile?" She nodded, her expression grave. "They will not harm you if I surrender willingly. But if I resist—" Her voice trailed off, and I didn't need her to finish the sentence to understand. The implications. I turned back to the console, scanning the readings. The craft was closing in fast. "Then we don't let them find us," I said, my voice firm. "If you don't want to go back, we'll figure out a way to avoid them." Her eyes widened, and for the first time I saw a flicker of hope in her expression. "You would do that for me?" I shrugged, trying to downplay the risk. "Well, I'm not exactly a fan of being boarded by hostile aliens, Princess, or not. Besides, you seem like someone worth helping." A small, genuine smile graced her lips, and it sent a warmth through me that I couldn't quite explain. "Thank you, Torin," she said softly. Without wasting another second, I turned to the ship's controls and began plotting a course away from the approaching craft. The ship's engines roared to life, and I felt the familiar lurch of acceleration as we veered off into a new trajectory. The unidentified craft followed, but I pushed the ship to its limits, zigzagging through asteroid fields and deploying countermeasures to throw them off our trail. Throughout it all, Rihanna stood by my side, her presence a steadying force amid the chaos. Her calm determination was contagious, and I found myself drawing strength from her unwavering resolve. After what felt like an eternity, the radar finally cleared. The pursuing craft had either given up or lost our trail. I let out a long breath, sinking into the pilot's chair as the adrenaline began to fade. "We're clear," I said, glancing over at her. Rihanna nodded, though her expression remained serious. "You took a great risk for me," she said. "I will not forget this." I waved off her gratitude with a tired smile. What's life without a little risk, right? She didn't respond immediately, her gaze lingering on me as if searching for something. "You are unlike anyone I have ever met, Torin," she said finally. "Perhaps there is more to humans than I realize." Her words sent a strange warmth through me, and for the first time in a long while I felt a sense of purpose. An unspoken bond was forming between two souls from vastly different worlds. As the ship settled into a quiet cruising speed, Rihanna turned her attention back to me. "Tell me more about this, love," she said, her voice tinged with curiosity. I hesitated, unsure where to begin, but as I looked into her amethyst eyes, I realized that this was only the beginning of our journey, a journey that would challenge everything we thought we knew about ourselves, our worlds, and the infinite possibilities of connection. And in that moment, as the stars stretched endlessly before us, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. The gentle hum of the ship's engines filled the silence as I leaned back in my chair, watching Rihanna with curiosity. She sat on the edge of the control panel, her posture regal despite the exhaustion etched into her features. Her amethyst eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail of my modest spaceship, from the weathered controls to the scattered tools on the workbench. "Love is not something you can easily explain," I said, breaking the silence. Her earlier question still lingered between us. "It's more than a feeling. It's a connection, a sense of belonging, like you're a part of something bigger than yourself." Rihanna tilted her head, her silver hair cascading over one shoulder like liquid starlight. "A connection," she repeated softly. "And this connection, it is worth the pain it often brings?" I chuckled dryly, running a hand through my hair. "That's the thing about love. It's not always easy, but the moments of joy, of being truly seen by someone else, make all the pain worth it. At least, that's what I believe." Her gaze grew distant, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the control panel. "Among my people, connections are transactional. Partnerships are arranged for mutual benefit, and once the purpose is fulfilled, the bond dissolves. There is no permanence, no vulnerability." Her words hung in the air, and I felt an ache in my chest for reasons I couldn't fully explain. "That sounds lonely," I said quietly. Rihanna's eyes met mine, and for a moment the regal mask she wore slipped, revealing something raw and unguarded. "Perhaps it is," she admitted, "but it is all I have known." I stood and walked over to her, leaning against the console. "Well, you're here now," I said, my voice steady, "and maybe that means you're meant to experience something different." Her lips parted slightly, as if to respond, but before she could speak, a sudden tremor shook the ship. The lights flickered and an ominous hum reverberated through the cabin. "What the hell?" I muttered, rushing to the control panel. The radar lit up with a new signature, another ship, much larger than the one that had pursued us earlier. Rihanna's expression darkened as she joined me at the controls. "That is a royal cruiser," she said, her voice tight. "They have found us." I cursed under my breath, my hands flying over the controls. "We need to get out of here. Now." "No," Rihanna said firmly, placing a hand on my arm. "You cannot outrun them. Their technology is far superior to yours." "Then what do you suggest?" I asked, my frustration bubbling to the surface. She hesitated, her gaze shifting to the viewport, where the cruiser loomed in the distance like a predatory beast. "Let me speak to them," she said finally. "Perhaps I can convince them to leave." Are you out of your mind? I stared at her, my jaw tightening. And what happens to you? You think they'll just let you go because you ask nicely? Her silence was answer enough. Forget it, I said, turning back to the controls. I'll figure something else out. Before I could react, Rihanna reached out and placed her hand over mine, stopping me. Torrin, she said softly, her voice carrying a weight that made me pause. This is my burden to bear. You have already risked too much for me. Her touch was cool but steady, grounding me in the midst of the chaos. I met her gaze, and for the first time I saw not just an alien princess, but a woman trying to find her place in a universe that had already decided who she was supposed to be. Rihanna, I began, but the words caught in my throat. She offered me a faint smile, one tinged with sadness. Thank you for showing me kindness, she said. It is more than I have ever known. Before I could stop her, she stepped toward the communications console and activated the link. The screen flickered to life, revealing the stern visage of a woman with the same striking silver hair and amethyst eyes as Rihanna. Mother, Rihanna said, her tone respectful but firm. The woman's gaze hardened. You have caused enough trouble, Rihanna. Return to the ship immediately. I will come willingly, Rihanna replied, but on one condition. You leave the human out of this. The Queen's eyes flickered to me, her expression unreadable. This human aided in your escape, she said coldly. He is a threat to our sovereignty. He is no threat, Rihanna insisted. He offered me shelter when I had nowhere else to go. If you harm him, you will only prove the very things I have come to question about our ways. The Queen's lips thinned, her gaze narrowing. You would defy your own people for the sake of a primitive creature? Rihanna straightened, her chin lifting in defiance. Perhaps I would, because in his so-called primitiveness, he has shown me more humanity than I have ever seen in our kind. The Queen's expression faltered for a fraction of a second, but it was enough to give me hope. Very well, she said finally, the human will remain unharmed. But if you do not return willingly, I will not show such mercy again. Rihanna nodded, her shoulders relaxing ever so slightly. I will comply. The connection ended abruptly, and the cabin was plunged into an uneasy silence. You didn't have to do that, I said, my voice low. Rihanna turned to me, her expression unreadable. Yes, I did, she said simply. I took a step closer, my hands balling into fists at my sides. This isn't right. You shouldn't have to go back to a life that doesn't make you happy. Her gaze softened, and she reached up to touch my cheek, her fingers cool against my skin. Sometimes we must make sacrifices for the greater good, she said quietly. But I will not forget what you have taught me. I covered her hand with mine, holding it against my cheek as I searched for the right words to say. But before I could speak, the cabin filled with a bright light, and Rihanna was suddenly pulled away from me by a beam of energy. Rihanna, I shouted, reaching out for her, but it was too late. She was gone. The light faded, leaving the cabin eerily quiet. I stood there, my heart pounding, as the reality of what had just happened sank in. She was gone, but her absence left a void that I knew would never be filled. I sank into the pilot's chair, staring out at the stars. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Hope. Because even though she was gone, I knew that Rihanna's journey was far from over. And deep down, I believed that our paths would cross again, somewhere among the infinite expanse of the universe. She was out there. And as long as there was even the smallest chance of seeing her again, I would keep searching. Because sometimes, in the vastness of space, the connections we make are the only things that truly matter. The silence of the cabin was deafening as I sat motionless in the pilot's chair, staring out into the endless void of stars. Rihanna was gone, taken back to a life she didn't want, a world that demanded her compliance. Her absence left an ache in my chest that I couldn't shake, but it also ignited a fire deep within me. I wasn't ready to give up on her. Not yet. The Queen ship had left a faint energy trail, and my ship's sensors were still capable of tracking it. The thought of following a royal cruiser, a vessel brimming with advanced alien technology, was ludicrous. But the alternative, doing nothing, was unbearable. I stood and began prepping the ship for pursuit. My hands moved with purpose, flipping switches and adjusting dials. The rhythmic hum of the engines roared to life. If this was a suicide mission, so be it. At least I'd be fighting for something, for someone who mattered. Hours turned into days as I followed the cruiser's trail across the galaxy. The energy signature grew stronger, leading me to a massive alien station orbiting a gas giant, its surface swirling with vibrant hues of orange and green. The station was a marvel of engineering, a structure that seemed to defy gravity with its intricate spires and glowing panels. I approached cautiously, activating the ship's cloaking mechanism, a rare upgrade I had salvaged years ago. It wasn't foolproof, but it would give me a chance to get close without being immediately detected. Docking at an auxiliary port, I slipped into the station, my heart pounding with each step. The corridors were eerily silent, their smooth metallic walls reflecting the faint pulsating light that ran along the edges. My pulse quickened as I navigated the maze-like structure, relying on a stolen schematic I had downloaded from their network. It showed me the most probable location for Rihanna's quarters. When I reached the chamber, 2 guards stood at the entrance, their sleek armor glinting under the dim light. I crouched behind a corner, my mind racing. Rushing in would be suicide, but waiting too long wasn't an option. Rihanna was inside. I could feel it. I pulled out a small device from my belt, a modified EMP grenade. With a quick toss, it rolled toward the guards, emitting a low-frequency hum before discharging. The energy field around them flickered and they collapsed, temporarily incapacitated. I darted forward, my heart hammering in my chest, and keyed open the door. Inside, Rihanna stood by a window overlooking the swirling gas giant. She turned at the sound of the door sliding open, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Torin," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't hesitate. Crossing the room, I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly. She felt warm, real, and alive, more than I could have hoped for after days of fearing the worst. "You came for me," she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "Of course I did," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't leave you here." Her fingers tightened on my jacket, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The weight of everything that had happened seemed to melt away in that embrace. But the moment was short-lived. An alarm blared through the chamber and Rihanna pulled back, her expression sharp. "We have to go," she said. "The Queen will know you're here." "I figured as much," I said with a grim smile. "Do you have a way out?" She nodded, grabbing a small device from a nearby table. "There's a maintenance shuttle in the lower hangar. It's not well guarded." We moved quickly, the alarms growing louder as we navigated the labyrinthine corridors. Rihanna led the way, her familiarity with the station proving invaluable. As we approached the hangar, footsteps echoed behind us. "Reinforcements," Rihanna said. "Torin, go!" she urged, pushing me forward as she turned to face the approaching guards. Her hands began to glow with an otherworldly energy, a power I had only glimpsed before. She raised them, and a wave of force rippled down the corridor, sending the guards sprawling. I hesitated, torn between staying to help and trusting her to handle herself. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes fierce. "I'll be right behind you. Go." Reluctantly, I ran toward the shuttle, firing up its systems as she joined me moments later. The small craft roared to life, and we shot out of the hangar, dodging beams of energy as the station's defences came online. The Queen's cruiser loomed in the distance, and it wasn't long before it gave chase. The shuttle shook as blasts of energy narrowly missed us. Rihanna worked alongside me, her hands flying over the controls with precision. "We can't outrun them forever," I said through gritted teeth. "We won't have to," she replied, her voice steady. "There's a wormhole nearby. If we can reach it, we might lose them." The wormhole appeared on the sensors, a swirling vortex of light and energy. It was unstable, but it was our only chance. I pushed the shuttle to its limits, the engine straining as the Queen's cruiser closed in. Just as we reached the wormhole, a massive blast rocked the shuttle, sending it spiralling. Alarms blared, and I fought to regain control as the vortex swallowed us whole. The transition was disorienting. Colours blurred together, and the shuttle shuddered violently as we hurtled through the wormhole. When we emerged on the other side, the cruiser was nowhere to be seen. We had made it. I exhaled a shaky breath, slumping back in my seat. Rihanna sat beside me, her shoulders sagging with relief. For a moment, the only sound was the steady hum of the shuttle. "That was close," I said, glancing at her with a wry smile. She returned the smile, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "Thank you, Torin, for everything." We landed on a remote moon, its surface barren but safe. The days that followed were quiet, giving us time to recover and plan our next move. Rihanna spoke of her desire to build a new life, one free from the constraints of her royal lineage. She dreamed of creating a haven where her people and humans could coexist, where connections were born not of obligation, but of choice. As the days turned to weeks, we grew closer, our bond deepening in ways neither of us had anticipated. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to truly share a connection with someone, a bond that transcended words, a sense of belonging I had thought impossible. One evening, as we sat beneath the stars, Rihanna turned to me, her expression soft. "Torin," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you've shown me a different way to live, to feel. I want to build this future, but I can't do it alone. Will you stand by me?" I reached out, taking her hand in mine. "Always," I said simply. Together, we began laying the foundation for a new chapter, one filled with hope and possibility. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, but as long as we faced it together, I knew we could overcome anything. In the end, it wasn't about where we came from or the challenges we faced. It was about the choices we made and the connections we forged. And as I looked into Rihanna's eyes, I knew we had found something worth fighting for, a future worth living for.